Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, John Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we are going to be concluding Season 2 of What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? Highschool DxD, Mark of the Dragon. Season 2, Part 3, the Season 2 Finale. As always, if you enjoy Power Core Productions and Podcastings, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Where we last left off in Season 2, Part 2, we had the introduction of Volley, the White Dragon Emperor, having come in after the cleanup, basically, when Issei went God mode and basically destroyed Kokobile in a beatdown. Now we see that the forces are all coming together to try to negotiate peace, that being between the angels, the devils, and even the fallen angels. However, Blackheart still looms in the shadows, gathering forces of his own as his own plans and machinations are going to be coming into full effect. In today's story, you're going to learn about the origins of Blackheart. Why did he become the way that he was? What relationship does he have to Lady Mephisto beyond that of a mother and a son? And what will the fate of the world be when Blackheart and the Ghost Rider come face to face for the first time? For all this and more, stay tuned as we get into today's video of What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? Highschool DxD, Mark of the Dragon, Season 2, Part 3, the Season 2 Finale. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. As the three of them stood on the pier, Rainier cowering behind Issei, fearing for her life in that very moment, as she came face to face with the Governor General of the Fallen Angels, Azazel himself. Issei was at the ready, unsure of what type of fight he was going to be getting himself into. He had heard of Azazel, but to think that he would actually come into contact with him, that was another story. Azazel looked at the two of them weirdly before making it pretty obvious that there wasn't going to be a fight. At least if there was, it wouldn't be here. Even he wasn't stupid enough to put people's lives at risk. Although he would comment that as far as Rainier was concerned, she had nothing to worry about. After all, she was now a devil in the service of the House of Grimmery, so she wasn't his problem anymore. And he had taken note of the fact that she had been doing her best to change, to make amends for the wrongs that she had committed, and he commended her for it. In the meanwhile, he told them that his main reason for being there, besides getting a gauge on who they were, was also to inform them that due to the events that had been taking place, a summit was going to be held between the leaders of the angels, the devils, and the fallen angels. Once they were informed of this, they would go and confirm things with Rias and the others. And indeed, a summit was going to be held. Rainier became a bit worried in that moment, unsure of what her future would be. But everyone would comfort her in that moment, telling her that everything was going to be fine and that they weren't going to let anything happen to her, no matter what. In the meanwhile, for Issei, his duties as a Ghost Rider made it so that he wasn't just spending all of his time in Japan. In hunting down the 99, he had already managed to capture 41 of the souls needed, with only 59 remaining. However, his adventures weren't just confined to his town or to his country. There were other forces at work. Through external means, Issei would often find himself being granted weeks off of school at a time, being given special remedial classes. But in actuality, these were circumstances created by Lady Mephisto, allowing Issei the flexibility to leave school when necessary to fulfill his duty. Issei would be sent all around the world, being given a special plane ticket that allowed him to fly first class, Lady Mephisto knowing how to travel in style. Issei would find himself in many parts of the world, from Europe to America, to parts of Africa and Asia, and everywhere in between. Whenever he got to these locations, he would use a magic summoning circle. In doing so, it would bring his car to him, so he could travel through there as well. He was also given a special license, a license imbued with magic. Whenever any of the local authorities were to look at the license, it would give the license a registration to that country, up to date and everything fully on the up and up, allowing Issei to basically travel freely without any worries of being stopped for any reason. In doing so, his latest mission had found him racing through the streets of Italy, chasing after one of the 99 in the process. Meanwhile, back in Japan, for the girls, things had changed very much. All the while, whenever Issei was leaving, the girls would usually stay over at his place to keep Rainier and Astia company, as well as keeping them safe and protected, all of them sticking together and such. Although when they did, they would often speak amongst themselves, talking about Issei, and the many things that they liked and admired about him. For many it was his strength, his dedication, his nobility. For Rainier, she reflected on the mercy that he showed her. For Asya, it was his kind heart, despite his power. For Rias and Akano, they thought about his chivalry, about how he would never give up on those whom he cared for. For Rias especially, remembering how she was saved from Riser because of him. And for Zenobia, she appreciated the strength he had, but the modesty in which he showed it. They remembered when talking to Irina that she remarked that Issei wasn't really like how he used to be. At least that's what Irina had seen the last time that she and Issei were together, before she returned back with the pieces of Excalibur. She noted that Issei was a boy who was always obsessed with girls, almost to an unhealthy level, but it seemed as though now he had mellowed out a lot more. At least he didn't go around declaring his love for boobs 24/7. But was it true? Had Issei changed? Was he different than how he used to be? Did the boy that wanted to be harem king no longer desire that goal? Well, the answer wasn't entirely wrong, but it's not entirely right either. Issei's love for women never changed. The idea of him having a harem never changed. Many things for him in his life had changed, but those were constants that would never leave his heart. You could say that Issei was simply a boy who had started to become a man a lot sooner than even he thought he would. He had gotten to the point in his life where he couldn't just focus on being with girls 24/7. He had other real life responsibilities that required his time and focus, and if he wasn't, it could potentially result in the death of him and everyone that he cared for. He couldn't afford to be reckless, and he couldn't afford to waste his time. You could simply say that Issei had gotten to the point where he desired quality over the quantity. Even he noticed that more girls were paying attention to him now than ever before. The way he carried himself, the way he moved and operated. It caught the attention of many girls, not just the ones of the Occult Research Club. And Issei wasn't blind to noticing this. However, at the same time, he had just gotten to the point where every girl's attention just didn't mean that much to him. He preferred the attention of the ones of whom he truly cared for and had a relationship with. You could just say that Issei had his priorities together. In the meantime, as Issei was wrapping up his business in Paris, he would go and sit on the bridge after a long-fought fight, watching the Eiffel Tower under the night sky as the people walked past him. The smell of fresh food and pasta and bread in the air. Couples walking about happily, unaware of the darkness that filled this world. As he sat, a motorbike would appear next to his car. It was Danny. Danny would sit on the bench next to Issei, taking a draw from his cigarette. He would commend Issei on how far he was coming in his mission. The fact that he was almost halfway through, that said a lot about his skill for being a rookie writer. Issei just brushed it off as he didn't care all that much. He and Danny's relationship was a rather odd one, to say the least. Danny was like the seasoned cop, and Issei was basically the rookie or so. Issei was a good rookie. He had a lot of talent. But every now and again, he would get humbled a little bit by Danny being around, to remind him who the true big and bad really was. But as they sat together though, Issei, he asked about Blackheart. He asked about just what and who it really was. And why the hell was it something so great that Lady Mephisto just couldn't capture it herself? After taking another puff from his cigarette, Danny decided that Issei should know the story. And so he told him. Long ago, Lady Mephisto and his mentor, the ghostwriter that came before him, Johnny Blaze, they were once enemies at odds with one another. But over time, they came to settle their differences. They even found love. They eventually were together in secret, and they had a child. His name was Nicholas Blaze, after his father. The three were a happy family for a time. That is, until one day Nicholas was kidnapped and taken away by a demon. Johnny and Lady Mephisto searched desperately for their son and fought to free him. However, in the process of the fight, the boy tragically died. Both Johnny and Lady Mephisto were devastated by the loss of their son. And for Lady Mephisto, despite all the power that she possessed, she did not truly command the ability of life and death like many would assume. Of course, her son could have been reborn as a devil, but that was a practice that Lady Mephisto didn't really have. She could rebirth someone, but that was only if they were alive, not already dead. She was the Reaper of Souls. She could not restore them. However, Lady Mephisto ignored all of this. She used the same spell in which she turned living beings into ghostwriters to try and bring back her fallen son. The spell went, in a way, haywire. It worked, but it didn't. When Lady Mephisto attempted to bring back Nicholas Blaze, something returned. It returned in Nicholas's body. But whatever it wasn't Nicholas. At least, not the one that they knew. It looked like him. It talked like him. It acted like him in every way, shape, and form, but it was those eyes. It was something about the eyes that just didn't seem right. Gone were their fire and passion, any sign of life within them. No, his eyes were a pure black. A black as deep as the night sky itself when there is no moon or stars. A black as deep as the feathers of a raven. They seemed devoid of all life and all sensibility. And for some time, they tried to ignore this. They tried to continue to be that happy family, but the boy he was not the same. And it only made matters worse when they discovered what the boy was really up to in the human world. There had been a string of killings and murders, and Johnny was sent to investigate, but the problem was, he couldn't sense who was doing it. He could tell that there was definitely a wicked soul, but the problem was that there was no soul to trace. None at all. It was like truly chasing a ghost. It was like trying to find something with no footprints, no scent trail, nothing at all. And for the longest time, Johnny could not tell who this murderer was, until eventually he made himself known. It was, in fact, his son. And they had finally noticed something about their son something that they should have known, but they ignored. And that was the fact that their son, he did not have a soul. He was devoid of one. They couldn't sense anything within him. They could tell of the malevolence, but there was no pure soul within him. Neither good nor wicked, nothing they could trace, nothing to exercise. When he revealed himself and what he was doing, they were devastated to see just how far their son had sunk into the darkness. They tried to reason with their son. They tried to save him, to bring him back, but there was nothing that they could do. Eventually got to the point where they realized they had to bring him down. If not for the safety of the world, but for his own sake. Johnny went out to bring his son home. And Johnny never returned. Johnny was killed by his son. Many would wonder how that was even possible. Even back then, Blackheart's powers were nothing like they are now. If anything, Johnny should have had enough power to deal the fatal blow, but a father's love runs deep, even deeper than the spirit of vengeance. While the spirit was ready to kill, the human was weak in that moment. And because of that, it created the opening that Blackheart needed to strike down his father and to kill him. Since then, every Ghost Rider at some point or another in their life has attempted to bring down Blackheart. You could say it's the ultimate mission of the Rider, to bring the ultimate of the damned down for their judgment. But how can you damn a soul that doesn't exist? How can you kill something that seems devoid of life and is already dead? That was the nature of Blackheart and what made him so dangerous to the Ghost Rider. Blackheart was the antithesis of everything that he stood for. For everything that the spirit of vengeance was, Blackheart was merely the opposite. And Danny was the only other Ghost Rider who had ever fought in him and lived. Many before and many after had all died facing off against Blackheart. But even for Danny, even despite the fact that he was able to survive, he admitted that the fight changed him. He was not what he used to be, and he knew he could never be that again. Every time you fight that beast, that being, you lose a piece of yourself. It's like a part of you just disappears, and a part of you that you can never get back. Even within Danny's own heart, he knew that a part of him was missing. A part of him that felt as though it had been stripped and pulled away. A piece of him that he wished he could get back desperately. And what frightened him was the fact that he knew he could never get it again, and that damn Blackheart was the one that took it from him. But there was nothing else that they could do for now. And since then, Lady Mephisto, she's been rather recluse. She never opened her heart up to love ever again. Not since of what her son did to her. Issei would then ask, if Blackheart was really that dangerous, then why didn't Lady Mephisto take him on? After all, if anyone would be capable, it would be her, with power on par with that of the Devil Kings. But Danny would explain that it wasn't that simple. There was a reason why Blackheart avoided the underworld at all costs. You see, in the underworld, a Devil King is truly at their strongest. Within your domain, a Devil King is often the superior. However, the truth cannot be said when they are in another realm. When, for example, they are all on Earth, as powerful as they might be, and as dangerously strong as they could be, even then, they can never access their full power in this world. It just simply isn't possible. So for Lady Mephisto, the power that she could use in the mortal world compared to the underworld is entirely different, even if they're both pretty destructive. And the sad truth is that in the mortal world, Blackheart holds the advantage. You could say this is his domain. Unless they're willing to risk destroying the entire world in the process to defeat him, then the best thing they can do is hold off. That's why she couldn't just go after him. Because in reality, if Lady Mephisto fought him in our world, there's a strong chance she might lose. Issei would be very shocked to hear this. He knew that he might be going up against someone who was dangerous, but he had no idea that the person he could be facing would be this strong. Someone so powerful that even the Devil Kings would have to be wary when facing him. It just made him all the more anxious. If all of these beings couldn't defeat him up until now, then what could he do? All the same, Issei would eventually return home. Getting off of his flight, he carried his bags as he walked through the airport. And as he did so, he would see a boy with white hair, sitting on the tarmac waiting to meet him. As the two approached one another, the boy would introduce himself as Vali, the White Dragon Emperor. Issei was surprised that the White Dragon actually made himself known, and that he showed his face. He asked him what he wanted, and Vali merely wanted to see the spirit of vengeance for himself. He sensed the incredible power that he had when he fought Kokobile, and he thought for a moment that he would like to see just what you were all about, what he was truly capable of. He also asked about Irina, since she were the Red Dragon Empress, but Issei shut down that conversation real quick, since he didn't really like or trust this Vali guy all that much. It wasn't that he could sense any malevolent energy within him, or anything like that. It was just a matter of not liking him all that much. All the same though, Vali would warn him to be careful. After all, he never knew what type of dangers he'd be facing. And Issei would tell him likewise before leaving. Eventually, he made it back to school in time though. It was the event for the Parent-Teacher Day, where the students' parents would come to the school. All the same though, Issei felt a little off about this day since his parents were no longer alive, but that was something he had learned to get over and get used to for the most part. He assured Rainier that everything was fine and that he had forgiven her for what had happened. But even still, Rainier still felt responsible, and she was, for the death of his parents. Again, her atonement. But all the same, the day went fairly well. Up until the point where Issei had even gotten the chance to meet with Sir Zex one-on-one. Sir Zex thanking him for saving his sister Rias. Issei also asked why Rias was still wearing the eye patch over her left eye, wondering what was wrong with it. That's when Sir Zex would have a somber tone, remarking that Rias' fight with Riser had scarred her, not just emotionally and mentally, but physically as well. A scar that would not so easily heal, and she didn't want anyone else to see. Issei understood what he meant by this, although he also wondered why Rias seemed to be a lot different. The Rias that he used to know was always so outgoing, boisterous, and opinionated, though now she seemed more quiet and reserved, more focused on studying than ever before. Of course, she still had her charm about her, and her aura hadn't changed, but she seemed different. Sir Zexel explained that a situation like that could change anyone, but that for the most part, she had been doing a lot better, and it was all thanks to him. Although Issei had no idea what he had done, he didn't really see himself as doing anything all that worthwhile, but Sir Zex said otherwise. He believed that Issei had something about him, something that made others want to be with him, to gravitate towards him. He then said that it wasn't just Rias, but the other girls felt the same, and that maybe he should try seeing that sometime. Of course, Issei was aware to some extent how the girls felt about him, but at the same time, a part of him wasn't sure. He explained to Sir Zex what it felt like being in the Rider, the power, the feel as though you're turning into someone else entirely different. He wanted to protect them all no matter what, but he felt as though not just from other enemies, but potentially from himself. When he turned into the Ghost Rider, his mind went to different places. That sadistic side of him would come out. That part of him that he didn't want them to see. Because honestly, deep down, there was a part of him that enjoyed it. And the last thing he wanted was to scare them. Sir Zex understood, but he assured him that if there was anyone who could gain control, it was Issei, and he had faith in him to do so. With that, Sir Zex would bid him farewell, and the next day, Issei would be meeting with the others in the Occult Research Club, the group gathering together in front of a door that had been sealed off. The night of, Sir Zex had given Rias the command to unseal the bishop and to add it to her household, believing she was more than strong enough to control its power. Rias did as instructed, and when the door opened and they made their way inside, they would see someone cowering in the corner dressed in a girl's uniform. They thought it was a girl at first, at least Issei did, until he was informed that that was in fact a boy. The boy's name was Gasper Bloody. Once Gasper was free, it became quickly apparent that while the boy had latent power and potential, there was one thing offsetting that though. The fact that the boy was very shy and very afraid of the world around him, and Issei took note of that rather quickly. Issei learned of Gasper's backstory, how originally he was a half-human, half-vampire, rejected by both sides for not being fully one or the other and being rejected as a whole. On top of that, his balance breaker, the hidden Balor view, the ability to stop time in and of itself only made him seem more of a threat. Lost in the world with nowhere to go, he was taken in by Rias and added to her household. And his power, however, proved to be so great that even Rias couldn't keep it under control, and so was the reason why he was sealed away for as long as he was. Unlike most vampires, he was a daywalker, so walking out in the sunlight didn't bother him all that much, although things like garlic and holy crosses would still affect him, even before he was a devil and even more so after. While Rias wanted to look after and try to help him, she had to get things prepared for the summit, and as such, she would be leaving with Akeno and Kiba to get things ready, and she left Gasper's training in the hands of everyone else. Issei would watch over Gasper and help any way that he could, whenever he wasn't doing his own business as the Ghost Rider per se. Even sharing some one-on-one time with Gasper, taking him out for a late-night drive. The two of them talking about the powers that they were given and the responsibilities that came with them. Gasper started to see things a little differently. He understood now that his power wasn't really something that he should be afraid of. Although getting a mastery and control over it, that was going to be a different story. Though Issei felt he could potentially help him in some way, shape, or form. And they came up with various ideas and exercises to help him control the hidden Balor view. One of the more extreme ones Issei had was the idea of Gasper trying to stop his car, at least if he thought he were strong enough. Gasper really didn't think he was, until Issei put him in a situation where he might have to. Issei wasn't proud of this, but he figured if he was ever going to toughen the boy up some, they were going to have to test themselves and push each other to the limits. That's when he decided they were going to play a game of chicken. Issei drove till he found a building with a solid wall. He got about 100 feet away as they were both inside of the car. He made sure they were locked in and they had nowhere to go. Issei would then floor the gas pedal and would go driving straight towards the wall. He told Gasper in that moment he had to either stop them or get into a crash. Gasper was completely taken aback by this form of training. He didn't think that Issei would be so aggressive of all people. However, Gasper in that moment didn't have time to worry about Issei's ethics. It was either he stopped that car or they were going to crash into that wall. And unlike Issei, Gasper wasn't sure how well he could come out with a mangled body. Almost on instinct, the car would stop, even with Issei powering it with some of his Ghost Rider power. The flames on the wheels ceasing as the car stopped in mid-pace, just 10 feet away from the wall. As Issei depowered himself, he looked over to Gasper and Gasper looked at him, determined and a bit furious at what Issei had done. But then Issei would pat Gasper on the head, telling him that he was proud of him, since he had done it. He told him that not just anyone would be able to stop his power, and the fact that Gasper could do so, it just showed how strong he was. Issei then would drive away, and he would tell Gasper that he had faith in him, they all did, and that if they continued their training, they would surely become a lot more stronger, and they could use that power to protect those closest to them. Gasper agreed with this sentiment, and he felt even better about his training. From there, it became a little less intense, and rather than trying to crash a car into the wall, Gasper would be stopping volleyballs in midair that were thrown at him. At first, he couldn't stop any, but eventually he was able to stop 1 out of 20, then 5 out of 20, until eventually he was stopping 10 out of every 20 balls that were thrown his way. While his training was progressing nicely, they would, however, get a bit of an unwelcome visit. Rainier would be with Gasper, watching over him, when suddenly Azazel would appear out of nowhere. Rainier getting on her defenses at once and getting between Gasper and Azazel, and the others arriving not too long after. Although the fallen angel didn't come to fight. He had actually come to see where Kiba had gone, since he had heard so much about that Hellraiser Holy Devil Sword, and he wanted to see what it could do. But Kiba was gone, so the only thing left to do was see what Gasper was capable of. Seeing that he had the hidden Balor view, he would warn that that type of technique could be dangerous if not under control. Although the best way to supplement that would be by using blood, something potent and powerful, like Issei's blood. Although Gasper, while his training was improving somewhat, blood was not something that he wanted to dive into since he thought it was extremely gross. All the same though, Azazel still gave his advice before wandering off once again. Rainier and Issei couldn't get a reading on him at all. He gave off an intimidating aura, but yet he seemed to have good intentions. Of course, Rainier was always worried with the possibility that Azazel might seek revenge, But again, she was assured that they weren't going to let anything bad happen to her. All the same though, she still wanted to try her best to do better. In the meantime, one evening, as everyone were preparing to go home, Issei and Rias would be left alone in the club room together. Issei had just gone to pick up his jacket, but he looked at Rias, who seemed to be a bit nervous. He asked her what was wrong, and she looked up to him. She blushed for a little at that moment, since she realized she was alone with Issei. For Rias in this timeline, she had undergone a bit of a change in a lot of ways. She and Issei didn't have the relationship they had originally. One where she was seen as the superior and Issei the doting underling of sorts. Not that that original relationship was bad per se, but rather think of this from a new perspective. From Rias, in the old point of mind, Rias was usually always the strong one, and Issei was always vying to show that he was worthy of her. But now, the roles had been reversed. Issei demonstrated more than on one occasion that he was more than powerful enough to hold his own against some of the best beings in the world. And for Rias, she was in awe of that power, and in awe of him. Instead of Issei trying to prove himself to Rias in a way wanted to prove herself to Issei. To prove that she was capable, that she could do something. The scar on her eye and the eye patch she wore over it, it was a reflection of her failures as a head devil. She wanted to protect her household, to be as strong as possible and to do everything that she could. And yet, when the time came for her to do that, she failed miserably. If it wasn't for Issei saving her when he did, she would have been married off to Riser Phoenix, and there was nothing that she could have done about it. It was in that moment that she realized she needed to do better. She had to be better. She had to be stronger. It's why she pushed herself. It's why she was working even harder now than she used to. Because really, all she wanted to be was someone that could be worthy of the title that she was given. When Issei heard this, he then realized that Rias had really been trying hard to change herself, to be better. He recognized this growth. Even if she felt he didn't, he did. Before leaving, though, he would turn back towards her. He told her that she wasn't weak. Far from it. Anyone who could recognize their own faults and strive to change them could never be seen as weak in his eyes. But instead, they had the type of strength that he admired. This actually getting to her a bit as he left the room, causing her to turn as bright red as her hair, tucking herself away as she couldn't help but smile to herself in that moment. Her hard work wasn't going to waste, and it seemed as though the person whom she truly admired was taking notice. Eventually, the day of the meeting would take place. Koneko would be waiting with Gasper in the club room while everyone else was going to be going to the meeting. There was a tension in the air and everyone knew it. As they walked inside, Issei would see that not only were Sir Sex, Seraphal Leviathan, and Azazel sitting at the great table, but there was also someone else there. Someone he was not expecting to see. And that was none other than Lady Mephisto herself. As everyone made their way into the room, Rias, Akino, Kiba, Asia, Rainier, and Zenobia would stand behind Sir Zex with Graphia. Sona and Tsubaki would stand behind Seraphal Leviathan. Irina Shido would stand behind Sir Michael, Issei saying hello to her in the process. Vali would stand with Azazel, and Issei knew he had to take his place. He and Danny Ketch both, the two Ghost Riders, standing behind Lady Mephisto as the meeting would get underway. As the meeting got underway, the main discussion would be that of the Kokobile attack and things that were transpiring afterwards. It had come to the attention of all of the great deities that it was time to try to seek peace. After the last great war, their numbers were not as high as they used to be, and continuing conflict would only make matters worse. Azazel would take full responsibility for the Kokobile attack, noting that he saw to it that Lady Mephisto was treating him well in the underworld, the two of them having candid conversation with one another in the process, everyone giving their own testament as to what was happening in the fight itself. The reason for Lady Mephisto being here, despite not being a Devil King herself, was rather simple. She had power that was on par with the top Devil Kings, despite not having the actual rank. She chose not to, since that would require more formality and more responsibility that she truly didn't want. She was in charge of basically running the underworld jail, making sure that all those who were evil and wicked were punished thoroughly. But outside of that, she enjoyed her freedom to do as she pleased, and work of her own machinations. Her being brought here was more of a formality, but it was out of respect. Even if she didn't have the rank, they had to recognize the power she had in the room. She was just as capable as any of them of starting a war, and that was something no one wanted. Although Azazel would point out that there were other forces far greater than their own that they needed to speak of, that being the Red Dragon Empress, Irina Shido, and that being of Vali, the White Dragon Emperor. Also, there was Issei, the current Ghost Rider, who held the title of the Spirit of Vengeance. Of course, Danny Ketch could also use the Ghost Rider ability, but he did not have the title of the Spirit of Vengeance. That title belonged to Issei. These three great forces were definitely ones that could not be taken unlightly, and they were asked about their opinions of the future and what they wanted. For Irina, she desired peace above all else. She saw no real need to fight and had no real qualms with anyone. As for Vali, he wanted a good fight, but he had no intentions of starting a war. That was too much work. Although he made it very clear that as the White Dragon Emperor, as he looked towards Irina, as she was the Red Dragon Empress, the two of them would be fated to battle at some point. Irina understood this responsibility. A noble contest between the two dragons. That was something she didn't mind at all, as long as it didn't result in a full-on war or anything like that. But it wasn't just Irina he was interested in. No, he wanted to prove how powerful he was to himself, and he wanted to take on the best fighters around. As he looked towards Issei, he said when the time came, he would love to challenge the Spirit of Vengeance himself. Issei giving a look towards Vali. He didn't know why, but in that moment he became a bit thrilled. The idea of the two of them going at it, to see who really was the best. The White Dragon Emperor or the Ghost Rider. Who would come out on top in that exchange? That was something even Lady Mephisto wanted an answer to, since in all of her lifetime, the Ghost Rider had never come into conflict with either of the two dragons. She wondered how this could play out. As the summit was continuing though, they would soon find themselves under attack by magicians. It seemed as though a coup were in order, and the room seemed to stop in a time void, not just there, but surrounding the entire area. Outside of the leaders sitting at the table, only those with specially dignified powers were capable of resisting its effect. both Kiba and Zenobia with their special holy swords, both Irina and Vali with the power of the dragon that protected them, for Issei with the power of the Ghost Rider, and for Rias, it was the fact that she had actually been standing so close to Issei she held on to him for a moment, just long enough for Issei's power to basically act as a barrier, protecting her in the process as well. It soon became clear to everyone that there was another force at work, and they were under attack. Although why, they weren't entirely sure, but it seemed as though Gasper had been compromised. Rias would want to go after him at once, and Issei vowed to follow her, promising he would protect her no matter what. Lady Mephisto saw this relationship brewing between the two. She couldn't help but lament for a moment, as the way Issei acted towards Rias, it kind of reminded of her and Johnny at some point in their life. All the same though, they needed to get there quickly. Using the ability for castling, Rias and Issei could swap places with the spare rook she had in the club room at the time, and that could work to get them there, as well as getting Gasper free. Before leaving though, Azazel would give Issei a special armband to place on Gasper, to help get his power under control. He would look over and give Irina one as well. He understood that her balance breaker wasn't quite complete yet, but this would be a good way to activate it though, without needing to sacrifice anything like an arm or another limb. Irina was grateful, and with that, Rias and Issei would leave at once, going off to rescue Gasper from the enemy. While they were leaving to do so, Vali and Danny decided to go outside and pay their unwelcomed guests a proper welcome. That being of the Ghost Rider, Danny Ketch, and the White Dragon Emperor, Vali. The two of them would take on the magicians surrounding the area, dispatching of them. Vali getting a chance to see what a Ghost Rider was capable of. Even for someone like Danny, who didn't go around chasing souls like he used to, he was definitely a powerful being and not one to take lightly. Just as the battle was continuing, Kalia Leviathan, descendant of the original of the Leviathan King, would come and make herself known, vowing that she would reclaim the title stolen from her by Seraphal Leviathan. And not only that, she would overthrow and destroy the old system, and bring back that of the bygone era. Both Lady Mephisto and Azazel found her to be rather amusing, and they decided that they would take her on, Kalia believing that the power she had been bestowed would be more than enough to destroy them. As the sign and the mark of infinity came upon her, both Lady Mephisto and Azazel would be surprised. Azazel bringing out the dragon spear and entering into his own balance breaker, as the two of them realized that Kalia was being imbued with power from Orpheus, the infinite dragon. Although what did the dragon have to do with Kalia? And just what role did she play in all of this? They had no clue. In the meantime, Issei and Rias would arrive to the rescue. Issei using his power, he would send the magicians flying, before breaking Gasper and Konako free from their restraints. Placing the armband on Gasper, his power was able to be put under control, and those who had been frozen were eventually freed. They eventually arrived with the others, and they were able to help in the counter-strike and the attack, defeating the rogue agents all around them. While Lady Mephisto and Azazel, combining their power together, they would prove to be a match for this now powered Kalia Leviathan. She attempted to self-destruct, believing she could at least take out two of her enemies at once. Although, for Azazel, this would only cost him his arm, severing it before both he and Lady Mephisto would use their power to incinerate and destroy her once and for all. As the battle seemed to be dying down, all was well. That was until a dark energy would shoot Azazel in the back, actually dealing with him some serious damage as he got up to his feet. As everyone looked, on top of the school roof, there stood a young man, no older than, say, maybe Issei or Rias in appearance. His hair was kept down and was fully black, as he wore a black suit of his own. His eye was covered by a patch as well. He smiled happily as he looked over towards everyone. Lady Mephisto and Danny Ketch, the two of them having a look of fear on their face. For that was a boy they hadn't seen in a long time. As he walked over in front of everyone, he clapped happily, surprised to see how well they had managed to fight against Kalia. My, that was a pretty good show, guys. I must say, I didn't expect Kalia to be defeated so quickly, especially with the power we stole from Orpheus. But that was to be expected by someone who was a descendant of the old devil faction, always thinking with their heart and not their heads. I thought if she had used her power better, she would have at least been able to kill you, Azazel. Everyone would watch on, but Issei wanted to know who this person was. As Lady Mephisto looked back towards him, she simply said that this was her son, Blackheart. Blackheart made his way, eyeing everyone up and down, looking at them, observing them. No one dared make a move in this moment. One false step could result in the death of everyone here, the destruction of this town, or maybe even the country. Sir Zex would look towards Lady Mephisto and ask for confirmation if this was really her son, and she nodded in agreement. Everyone was now weary. They knew what type of power Blackheart had, and they knew that right now they were not in the favorable situation. As Blackheart walked though, he would explain everything that was happening up until now. You see, he, along with many other renegades, believed that this time and era of peace and prosperity, well, it was getting kind of boring and dull for him. And so, they had decided they were going to take matters into their own hands. It started with Blackheart in a meeting with Orpheus. Orpheus wanted to go to the dimensional gap where she could obtain her silence, a place where she could rest and be left alone. Blackheart agreed to help her in this goal. However, his intentions were not entirely pure. Tricking the young dragon, he had her sealed away and was siphoning off her power. Since her power was that of infinity, it wouldn't kill her, but keeping her drained and suppressed was key to the mission. With the power at his disposal, he would distribute it to those who would be worthy to him, the fight on his side. They formed what was known as the Chaos Brigade, and they had their own plans in the meantime. The goals of the Chaos Brigade were going to be rather simple. They would destroy all the leaders of the current factions of the various deities, and they would be replaced with ones much more suitable. They were going to make the world the way they wanted it to be. They were simply tired of playing games and waiting. In their mind, this new era of peace that they were seeking after, it was a joke. And it was a bad joke that had gone on for too long, and he was simply ready to put an end to it. As Blackheart walked towards his mother, though, his whole mood would change. He became happy, ecstatic. Mother, I didn't expect you to be here, though. That really threw a wrinkle in my plans. And old Danny boy. Oh man, you and I haven't played together in such a long time. You remember? Although I have to say, you're not really as good as Dad, though. Shut up, you damn brat. Oh, I didn't mean to step on your toes now, did I? I mean, it's just that Dad was giving it his all, and I actually felt it. But I mean, when you hit me, though, it's like, I don't know. He continued to taunt and mock all of them until eventually his eyes came to Issei. He seemed ecstatic as he and Issei locked eyes with one another. And then there's you, Mom's new favorite toy. Oh man, I have to say, you kind of bore me a little bit, you know? I've been seeing what you've been up to, and you're making good progress capturing the 99, but don't think that you're going to beat me so easily. I'll have you know, when it comes to the Ghost Riders, my father was the strongest of all of you, and that still remains to this day, and even he couldn't beat me. So, I don't know what you think you're going to do. Beat you? Please. You played the emotional card, and you got your father distracted, that was all. Don't think you're actually stronger than us. Everyone would be shocked by Issei's audacity in that moment. They didn't think that he would actually want to backtalk to Blackheart like that. Huh? You heard me, you spoiled little brat. What do you think? You think I'm anything like your father? Well, I'm not. I'm different from your father. You want to know why? Because you're not my son. So I don't have any attachment or feeling towards you. I just hate you. I'm going to get my hands around your sorry little neck, and I'm going to wring you dry. Issei would transform into his Ghost Rider state, and he went charging straight towards Blackheart. The boy disappearing from sight at once before appearing right behind Issei in that moment. Issei continued to throw kicks and punches towards him. However, he was able to block them with ease, before eventually grabbing his hand and breaking it. Not just breaking it, but severing it in the process. Issei's hand was ripped from his arm. He burnt out and blazing, yelling and screaming in pain, as Blackheart grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the ground. The others would jump in to aid Issei at once, the other leaders standing back before realizing they needed to jump in as well. But before they could, another barrier would form, blocking Azazel, Sir Zex, Michael, Seraphol, and Lady Mephisto and Danny from the fight. The barrier was formed by none other than Nightmare, a rather pale-looking man standing in a dark green suit. As he kept the barrier in place, he merely shook his finger, telling them that they weren't supposed to be getting involved so soon, but they would all get their turn with Blackheart at some point. Right now, he wanted to see what these youngsters were capable of. Everyone went charging towards Blackheart, using whatever powers they could. Asya and Gasper had managed to stay behind, along with the other leaders, since they weren't combatants, and their power wouldn't do all that much in the grand scheme of things here. Both Zenobia and Kiba, using their swords and swinging them towards Blackheart. He dodged every single one of them, before his arm would partially transform into something monstrous and pure black, blocking both of the blades that had little to no effect on him. You see, not having a soul had its advantages. Even if he did evil or did good, without a soul, there was nothing positive or negative to be assimilated with him. Essentially, without a soul, Blackheart had all the perks of being a devil, with none of the drawbacks, meaning holy weapons did little to nothing against him, and he brushed them off with ease. Rias and Akeno attempted to use their power as well, however even they too were brushed off. Issei, Volley, and Irina would go in for the main charge. Once Issei regrew his hand, now even more incensed and enraged than he was before, he would go in for the fight, Volley transforming into his balance breaker, and Irina using the armband as a sacrifice. She would gain her own balance breaker as well, a more feminine and red version of what Volley had. As the two of them went flying, the two dragons along with the Ghost Rider, the three great powers fighting against Blackheart. Blackheart could sense that they definitely had some skill, and they weren't ones to take lightly at all. But all the same though, they were only annoying him at this point, and he really didn't think that they were capable of all that much. That was until one particular moment. Volley managed to get in a good hit on his face, and it stung. It actually stung. He felt something. He had never felt anything in his life for a long time, but he felt that. And then Irina came along as well with an attack, and he could feel it. And then Issei, his anger now blazing and burning to the surface, he started throwing his punches in on him as well. And now he could feel it. He couldn't feel it before, but he could feel it now. This was what he was waiting for. This was what he wanted. They continued to beat on him, and he only begged for more. He wanted more. This feeling, this rush, it was a new sensation. He thought that they were all talk. He didn't think they could live up to the hype, but they were actually doing it. They were giving him a fight he wanted. It made Blackheart want to get serious now, and he started throwing back attacks of his own, knocking them back and sending them flying. Between the two dragons though, Irina was the most inexperienced with her balance breaker, and she was the easiest to target first, being knocked down by Blackheart. He seemingly was about to go in for the killing strike when Issei got between them. He grabbed him by the arm and threw him away. Irina continued to boost her power, although even she knew that she was going to be at her limit soon. She decided the best thing she could do was give Issei a fighting chance. She told him they were going to do what they did against Kokobile, to use that crimson fire, that maybe that could be enough. Overhearing their plan, Volley asked how much time they needed, and Irina asked as much as he could get them. Volley nodded, and decided that he was going to show Blackheart who truly was the best of the two dragons. He cockily said that by the time Issei got his power up, Blackheart would already be defeated. As Blackheart got back to his feet though, he would come face to face with the White Dragon Emperor. Ah yes, descendant of Lucifer. So you know. Oh, I do. I must say I'm surprised you're walking around with Azazel of all people. He made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And besides, I have my own goals and ambitions. I prefer not to be tied down. And yet you became one of his 4. You guys are pretty strong. I've heard about what you guys can do, but still, all the same, I don't think you're all that impressive. Even now, I really doubt you could do much to me. Really? Well, why don't we find out? Volley would use his divine dividing, and the power was managing to cut Blackheart in half for a while. And in doing so, they were actually able to stand on even footing, toe to toe for the briefest of moments. While everyone was nervous though, Azazel wasn't surprised. If there was anyone with a sacred gear capable of holding their own, it would be divine dividing, even if Volley couldn't match what Blackheart was. If he kept cutting his power in half, though, at the very least it would give him a standing chance. However, that chance didn't last for too long, as the power became too much and even volleys on sacred gear would be blasted away, the armor dissipating as he was being knocked to the ground. Just then, though, Irina's boosted gear had reached its limit as she placed her hand on Issei's back. She told him to take the power and to finish the fight, and Issei vowed to do so. Issei's flame around his sculling head would then change in that moment, from its bright orangey red to a dark crimson. This was Ghost Rider Crimson form, boosted, and he felt like he had unlimited power. Blackheart looked at him absolutely amazed. That was what the boosted gear could do? If it could turn Issei from what he was into this, then that was all the more intriguing. Blackheart then decided that maybe he should start taking things a bit more seriously now. Both of his arms transforming to their black monstrous states, and his eyes now becoming completely red. Both he and Issei would engage in their battle. The fated showdown between the Ghost Rider and Blackheart was now underway. Issei was using everything he had in his arsenal, conjuring hellfire to its most extreme. The penitent stare would be pointless. This being had no soul, so it couldn't feel regret over anything that it did, even if it wanted to. No, it was going to take brute force to win this fight, and Issei gave every bit of it that he had towards Blackheart. Blackheart could feel that he was starting to take some damage, but after a while, it wasn't wise for one to play with their food. As the fight continued, Issei thought he had the advantage for a brief moment as he slipped behind Blackheart. Pulling him in a bulldog choke, he slammed him backwards, his head crashing into the ground as Issei wrapped the chain around his fist and started to rain punches down onto his face. Issei seemed as though he were punching 1,000 punches a second. He didn't seem to be getting tired, and he didn't seem to be stopping. He just continued to bring down the pain. Issei pouring every bit of his anger, all of his power into the fight. Danny simply shook his head. That wasn't going to work. He knew firsthand because he remembered doing the same thing. He remembered when Johnny died. He remembered how angry he was and how he just flew into a rage. How he went flying and chasing after Blackheart. How he cornered him and started to beat him down just like how Issei was. But that never got victory. It just tired you out until you had nothing left to give. Until you were just running on fumes. And that was when Blackheart gained the advantage. Issei continued to beat him down so hard he didn't even realize that the power had dissipated. But yet he still kept going. That was a surprise, even for Blackheart. Even though the power seemed to have dissipated, it felt as though Issei was still boosted. It seemed as though, when he was using that power, he absorbed some of it into himself. He got that feeling, kind of like a contact high. He got an understanding of that type of power. And now it all made sense. Blackheart eventually decided that enough was enough. He grabbed both of Issei's hands and he snapped them once more. He kicked him back and threw him onto the ground. He gave him a dose of what he had been dishing out, and after a few solid hits to the head, Issei transformed back into his human state, bloody, battered, and beaten into the ground. Issei was now left in a pool of his own blood, and he could hardly make sense of what was happening. Blackheart, however, could feel that he had gotten what he wanted. They understood what they were up against, and he was satisfied with that. As the barrier became undone, the great leaders were about to prepare their attack against Blackheart. But he held up his hand, telling them that there was no need to do that. If they did, they'd only just be wasting their time, probably destroy this town in the process, and he knew none of them wanted that. As Nightmare then appeared next to him, he told them that he had to leave now, but the next time they met, they should make it more interesting. Issei slowly getting back on his feet once more. He told him that he should learn how to use that power. Then next time, they can really fight and have some fun. With that, the two of them would disappear. Volley being helped to his feet as well. They would immediately be sent to some healers, helping them to recover from everything they had been through. For Issei, those few hits, those few solid hits that knocked him out of his Ghost Rider form, it made him realize just how out of his depth he truly was. If Blackheart wanted to, he could have ended that fight whenever he wanted. They could all have been killed. It caused him to shake, a little with worry and with fear. Rainier and the others could sense this about him, although Azazel told them that he just needed some space to try to comprehend everything that had happened. But even then, he knew that this was something that Issei was just going to have to learn to live with. This is what Lady Mephisto meant when she said that there were beings out there with power he couldn't comprehend. If he didn't know any better, he would have been dead a long time ago. Blackheart was serious. Everything Issei thought he was doing, what he would have called training, wasn't even close to it. He needed to improve a lot more if he was going to stand a chance. But what was it about this power? There was a power inside of him? He felt that power of the Crimson Fire in that brief moment. It felt exhilarating. And for the briefest of moments, he thought that he was on par with Blackheart. If that power was really inside of him, if he could learn to tap into it without the need for the boosted gear and make it his own, then maybe he might stand a chance. Before leaving though, Michael and Irina would want to see Issei off. Michael apologizing for the situations that led them to where they were now. But Issei didn't blame him, and he also apologized for attacking one of his holy temples. As they were preparing to leave, Issei did ask for one favor. If it were possible, if he would allow for Zenobia and Asya to be able to pray. He knew it meant a lot to them. Michael would nod in agreement, and he promised that he would make the arrangements to allow them to do so. Irina was happy when she heard this. It just showed more of the kind nature that Issei always had. It was what she loved about him. As Issei laid back down to go to sleep, not really having that much strength to stay awake at the moment, Irina would rush back and kiss him on the forehead, telling him that she would be back soon, and that she needed to do some training of her own as well. Issei couldn't fight that thing on his own, and she knew she wanted to be there with him when he did it. Eventually, things would go back to normal, or at least as normal as things could be. Azazel would arrive to the Occult Research Club, and he would tell everyone that he was going to be their new advisor. His goal was to get them all trained up to be as strong as they could possibly be. If they were going to be fighting against Blackheart and the Chaos Brigade, they were going to need all the help that they could get. Volley would walk into the room also. He was dressed in a school uniform. Everyone was surprised by this. Not only that, but the fact that he was actually the descendant of a devil. It was a complicated story, but his grandfather was the original Lucifer, the Devil King that died during the last Great War. His mother was human, and that human blood enabled him to inherit the White Dragon Emperor's power. It seemed a bit of a conundrum more than anything else, but for him he called it divine fate. When asked what he was doing here, Azazel would explain that he had a group, 4 unique individuals, with powers far exceeding that of anything they could ever imagine. They all came from different backgrounds, and he formed them together to serve as a force to help. They were known as the 4 Horsemen, and Vali was one of them. As for the other 3, well, they would meet them in due time. But for now, Vali was going to be here to help. Also, he needed training also. Despite how powerful he was, Blackheart had made him look like a fool, and that was something he wasn't going to tolerate. Of course, he had his own goals in life, his own things that he wanted to accomplish, and he was going to accomplish them, but before all else, he was going to see to it that Blackheart would pay, and he would pay by the hands of the White Dragon Emperor. Now having a new ally on their side, there was also another announcement that was going to be made, and that was from Sir Zex himself. Azazel would announce that all of the girls in the Occult Research Club were going to be moving in and living with Issei. Issei was surprised by all of this and immediately tried to shoot it down. Not that he didn't like the idea, but he had a small 1-bedroom apartment. It was already difficult to maintain with he, Rainier, and Asya. Where was everyone else even going to live? That was until Rias would smile, stating that her brother had actually made modifications to Issei's home. Modifications that were bigger. Very big. His 1-bedroom apartment now turned into that of a full-scale mansion, all to himself. Everyone would move their things in, and they were all happy for this new arrangement. All of the girls believing that now they would have a chance to be closer to Issei than they were before. Issei making many trips with his car, driving to and from people's homes and helping move their bags and their boxes and their things of that nature all into the mansion. Vali thankfully was able to help out before eventually he went to his own place. As everyone was settling in though, there was one place that was made especially for Issei. It was a garage next to the mansion. As Issei made his way inside, not only would he see his car, the Black Skyline, but there were a few others as well. Tools and other unique objects all around, to be used at his disposal. He was impressed to see everything he had in here. It was as if he were walking into heaven itself, at least for him, and his love for cars after all. As he made his way inside, and he noticed everything around, Azazel would appear at the doorstep, explaining that this was made especially for Issei since he had a thing for cars and all, and Azazel pitched in also since he had a few models that he wasn't really using anymore. Collecting cars was nice, but he knew that there were some that could be given away, so he gave them to Issei to allow him to do with as he pleased. Maybe make some modifications. Truly see what the Ghost Rider's limits could possibly be. And as he did so, he would tell Issei that he had special training in mind for him. Deep down, Issei had a power. One that he believed could rival all of the Ghost Riders that came before and who would come after him. Issei was going to have to train and harness that power if he was going to stand a chance against Blackheart. At that moment, Issei would look down on the counter and he saw a small picture. It was a picture of him when he was younger with Irina. He thought about that and everything he had been through at that point in time, as he looked back up towards Azazel, with a serious expression on his face, a look of determination that Azazel hadn't seen before. One of a man on a mission and with a purpose. Issei wanted peace. This being Blackheart, he was a chaos of destruction who wanted to take it all away. Issei vowed that no matter what, Blackheart would be brought to justice. He was going to get stronger. And the next time the two of them came face to face, he was going to have his vengeance. And his vengeance would be felt for the ages. This concludes What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? Highschool DxD Mark of the Dragon, Season 2, Part 3. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have on PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we are going to be continuing What If Issei Was the Shield Hero? Highschool DxD Guardian of the Shield, Season 4, Part 1. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.